At a mandatory training, my supervisor whispered loud enough for others to hear, "Don't worry about her opinions, she's basically background noise at this point." Everyone snickered as he said, "Bless her heart, she still thinks she matters." I said nothing, took notes on every compliance violation he joked about during training, and filed a formal report. The look on his face when he was pulled out mid-session was priceless. I've never been the kind of person who talks much at work. I'm quiet. I stay in my lane. I do what I'm paid to do. I don't hang around gossiping in the break room or trying to make friends with upper management. I come in, I do my job, I go home. I've been working at this insurance company in Raleigh, North Carolina, for 7 years. Long enough to know who's real and who just pretends. Long enough to know the difference between someone who earned their role and someone who kissed enough asses to land in the right spot. My role is internal audit and compliance. Not glamorous. Not exciting. But I know every policy, every federal regulation we're supposed to follow. And I take it seriously. Not just because it's my job, but because if we mess this stuff up, real people can get hurt. Clients. Employees. But most people at my company treat compliance like a joke. Especially my supervisor, Dean. Dean came from our Charlotte office. Nobody asked for him. He just showed up one day and started calling himself a leader. Wore flashy suits. Talked over people in meetings. Made backhanded comments he thought were funny. A real piece of work. He didn't know squat about compliance, but he acted like he knew everything. He'd brush off important policies and roll his eyes during meetings. He was always trying to look like the smartest guy in the room. He didn't like me much. I guess I wasn't part of his little fan club. I wasn't young, I wasn't loud, and I wasn't trying to impress him. I just did my job, and I asked questions when something didn't look right. That bugged him. So when the annual compliance and ethics training came up, and Dean was somehow picked to lead it, I already knew it was going to be a disaster. It was supposed to be a simple, mandatory training session. Sit through a presentation, sign off that you understood the policies, and move on. But no, Dean turned it into a circus. The company crammed around 40 of us into a conference room. People from every department. Dean walked in like he was hosting a comedy night. Didn't even bother to start on time. He stood up front like he was waiting for applause. No slides. No real structure. Just him talking and joking around. 15 minutes in, he was already off the rails. Making fun of the policies. Saying stuff like, "We all know nobody really reads this crap, and if you followed every rule, nothing would ever get done around here." Some people laughed. Most just sat quiet. I took notes. Not because I expected anything useful. I took notes because something in my gut told me this was going to go sideways. Then I raised my hand. I asked a simple question. A real one. I wanted to clarify a point about handling sensitive customer information. He looked at me. Smirked. And then, in front of everyone, said this, "Don't worry about her opinions, she's basically background noise at this point." People started snickering. I felt my face go hot. I didn't move. I just stared at him. He laughed again and added, "Bless her heart, she still thinks she matters." This time the room broke into full-on laughter. Some people looked uncomfortable. Some tried to hide their grins. A few laughed like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. I didn't say a word. I didn't even flinch. But I felt something shift in me. It wasn't the insult that got me, I'd been overlooked before. It was the way he said it. The way he made sure everyone heard it. The way he turned me into a joke. Like I wasn't even human. That moment rewired something inside me. I didn't get angry. I got focused. For the rest of that session, I wrote down everything. Every joke. Every story he shared that showed he was bending rules or ignoring policy. Every time he bragged about doing something he wasn't supposed to do. Times, names, context, exact quotes. I knew what was allowed. I knew what wasn't. And Dean had crossed so many lines in 1 hour, I lost count. When the training ended, everyone filed out like nothing happened. I stayed behind for a minute, staring at the empty chair he'd sat in. Then I went back to my desk and typed it all up. Everything. I didn't just send a casual complaint. I filed a formal, detailed report. It was 8 pages long. I matched every one of his statements to the policy or federal law it violated. I listed witnesses. I didn't sign my name. But I made damn sure they couldn't ignore it. I sent it to the internal investigations team. I CC'd HR. I saved a timestamped copy for myself. No one responded. But I didn't need them to. 3 days later, we had another compliance session. Same room. Same crowd. Dean walked in acting like he owned the place. Made another dumb joke before starting. 10 minutes in, 3 people walked into the room. 2 from HR. 1 from legal. Dean, one of them said, "We need a word. Right now." His whole face dropped. He tried to play it off. "Can it wait?" But they didn't even blink. They escorted him out. Didn't say a word to the rest of us. The room went dead quiet. I sat still, watching the door close behind him. That was the last time I saw Dean in this building. We got an email the next morning. Dean is no longer with the company, effective immediately. Interim leadership will be announced soon. No explanation. No goodbyes. His desk was cleared out before lunchtime. But that wasn't the end of it. That's where everything really started to unravel. After Dean got pulled out of that room, things got real quiet in the office. People stopped talking in the hallways. Everyone started acting weird, like they were walking on glass. I could feel the shift. Some of the same people who laughed with Dean at that training wouldn't even look me in the eye anymore. By the following week, word spread fast, HR was doing interviews. Quiet ones. People were getting called in one by one. Even some folks who thought they were untouchable. Then came the whispers. That the company had brought in outside investigators. That this wasn't just about Dean cracking jokes in a meeting. That it went deeper. I heard someone from sales got put on leave. Another one, someone Dean always covered for, just stopped showing up. No explanation. His name disappeared from the internal directory by Friday. I didn't say a word to anyone. I didn't need to. My report had done its job. But I didn't know how far it was going to reach until one day I was called into HR myself. I thought maybe they figured out it was me who filed the report. I braced for it. But when I walked in, they were polite. Too polite. They asked me if I'd ever been pressured to change audit findings. If I'd been present for any closed-door meetings where policies were ignored. If I knew about the commission's adjustment spreadsheet Dean used that somehow never made it into any official records. I didn't lie. I gave them the same calm, clear answers I gave when I filled out the report. I told them who had been in those meetings. I gave dates. And every time I thought I might be crossing a line, I remembered what Dean said. She still thinks she matters. Turns out, I mattered a lot more than he thought. A week after that, someone from legal stopped by my cubicle. Said they appreciated my cooperation and asked if I'd be willing to speak with a compliance consultant they'd hired. I said sure. No hesitation. The consultant was ex-FBI. Calm, serious, didn't waste time. He walked me through a timeline they'd pieced together. Dean hadn't just been a bad boss, he'd been actively falsifying revenue reports to inflate his department's performance. Worse, he'd pulled other people into it. And here's where the twist really hit, one of those people had been on my team. Her name was Megan. She was newer, maybe a year in. Friendly, ambitious, always polite. I liked her. We weren't close, but I'd helped her when she first started. She'd even brought me coffee once during a tough audit week. So when they told me she'd altered internal documentation at Dean's request, I didn't want to believe it. But the numbers didn't lie. She had changed dates on compliance logs. Made it look like policy exceptions had been reviewed and approved, when they hadn't. She even signed off using my initials once. Forged it. I felt sick. Betrayed. I'd spent so much time thinking Dean was the only one playing dirty. I hadn't seen the ones right next to me. It hit hard when they fired her. She left crying. She didn't even pack her things. Security did it for her. After that, people started coming to me quietly. Thanking me. Not directly, no one said we know it was you, but I could tell they knew. One guy from IT passed by and said, "Took guts to do what you did." I just nodded. But not everyone was happy. There was this group. The ones who'd been close to Dean. His little circle. They stopped talking when I walked by. One of them, Paul, left a sticky note on my desk one morning that said, "You happy now?" I threw it in the trash. But later that day, my system access suddenly locked me out of internal files. At first I thought it was a glitch. But IT said it was an admin request. No explanation. Then my lunch went missing from the break room fridge. 2 days in a row. Petty stuff. But enough to make me realize not everyone was ready to move on. Some of them still blamed me for what happened. And then, one morning, I walked into the break room and overheard Paul talking to someone in the hallway. He didn't know I was around the corner. "She thinks she's some kind of hero," he said. "Dean's gone, sure. But she's not safe either. She's made enemies." That was the moment I knew this wasn't over. Dean was just the first crack. The whole damn wall was about to fall. And I was going to be the one standing when it did. After I heard Paul say I wasn't safe, I started watching everything more closely. My email. My files. Even how people looked at me when I passed their desks. Most people kept their heads down, but a few, the ones who used to laugh loudest at Dean's jokes, looked angry. Like they'd lost something they thought they were entitled to. The company tried to act like everything was fine. HR sent out some nonsense emails about a new chapter of accountability and moving forward as a team. But I could feel it. The tension. Like something was still rotting under the surface. 2 weeks after Megan got fired, we had a department meeting with a new acting supervisor. His name was Brent. He was from another branch, and he wasn't close to anyone here. That should have made things better. It didn't. During the meeting, Brent pulled up an audit dashboard on the projector and said something was off. Some of the numbers didn't line up with internal reports. And just like that, the room went cold. No one said a word. But I knew. Right away. I knew what had happened. Someone was still messing with the files. After the meeting, I checked the access logs. I wasn't supposed to have admin-level visibility anymore, not since they'd accidentally locked me out a week earlier. But someone had restored my full permissions. Quietly. No email. No ticket. That wasn't a glitch. That was intentional. I ran an audit trail. And that's when I saw it. Someone had logged in using my credentials and made edits to 3 audit records. All after hours. All tied to Dean's old projects. But I wasn't even in the building during those times. One of the timestamps was from when I was at a doctor's appointment. I had the receipts. It was clear as day, someone was framing me. I screenshotted everything. Saved it to a flash drive I kept on my keychain. Then I printed the logs and marched straight to legal. I asked for the same guy who handled the Dean investigation. He remembered me. Took me into a small room and let me explain everything. I showed him the logs, the access times, the proof I wasn't there. He looked through the papers slowly. Said, "We've been wondering why these issues weren't adding up. Thank you for bringing this." I could tell right then. They had no idea someone had picked up where Dean left off. Later that day, they pulled IT into a deep trace. I wasn't part of that investigation directly, but someone from InfoSEC told me off the record that they found login attempts from a remote desktop linked to Paul's old laptop, one he wasn't even supposed to have anymore. And that's when it hit me. Paul was trying to wipe away his connection to Dean's old files by pinning the changes on me. It made sense. Dean was gone. Megan was fired. But Paul had been in deeper than anyone knew. And now that the spotlight had moved, he was trying to bury what was left. The thing is, Paul wasn't just covering for himself. He was protecting someone else. I found out the next day, when I came back from lunch and found my drawer open. Not unlocked, open. My flash drive was gone. I never leave it in the open. It stays in the little zipped pouch I keep inside my locked drawer. But the lock was snapped. Like someone had pried it open with a flathead. My stomach dropped. That drive had every screenshot. Every log. Every timestamp. The entire trail proving I was being set up. I went straight to HR, told them what happened. They promised to review security footage, but I knew how that worked. Cameras don't cover every angle. And they'd probably be inconclusive. I didn't wait. I'd already backed up the drive the night before, onto a personal cloud account under a dummy email. And I still had copies of all the files on my home computer. What Paul didn't know was that I never trusted anything to stay safe in this office anymore. The next morning, a bombshell dropped. Brent, the new supervisor, called an emergency staff meeting. He looked pissed. Said someone had attempted to alter archived compliance records from an unauthorized IP address. Said legal had confirmed it was an inside job. Said there would be suspensions while they investigated further. Paul didn't show up to that meeting. When I got back to my desk, his nameplate was gone. They'd walked him out while we were all sitting in the conference room. But the twist wasn't over. Because later that day, I got a call. Blocked number. I answered. A woman's voice on the other end said, "You think this is over?" Dean wasn't the only one. And then she hung up. My blood ran cold. I didn't recognize the voice. But I knew what it meant. There were more. More people tied to this. And I'd just stepped into something way bigger than a bad supervisor. Something that went deeper than Dean. Something that started long before I ever took notes in that training room. That blocked call stayed in my head for days. You think this is over? Dean wasn't the only one. It wasn't just a threat. It was a warning. I knew what that meant, someone else still had something to lose. The next week, things got more chaotic. HR went quiet. Brent stopped holding meetings. Nobody knew who was in charge anymore. People started whispering about a full-blown internal collapse. Someone even said the company might face legal action from a group of former clients, something to do with bad policies being buried under fake paperwork. I didn't have proof of that yet. But what I did have was enough to make real damage. See, after Paul broke into my drawer and stole my flash drive, I started doing my own digging. Not inside the office, I didn't trust our systems anymore. But through state business filings, company emails I'd saved, and a few LinkedIn rabbit holes. And I found something. Dean wasn't just cooking numbers to boost his team. He was covering up policy changes that never got approved by legal, ones that cost real clients their benefits. One policy in particular had canceled several small business coverage plans early, which led to rejected claims, unpaid bills, and legal disputes. People lost money, and some lost their businesses. All because Dean wanted to make the department look like it was hitting targets. And it all connected to a VP named Allison Becker. She was the one who had fast-tracked Dean's transfer from Charlotte. She had signed off on the reporting structure that let him bypass compliance reviews. And she'd been CC'd on some of the same emails where he joked about keeping things flexible. I had copies of those emails. She never replied, but she saw them. She knew. And she didn't stop it. That's when I decided I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to destroy it. I reached out to a contact I had from a past compliance conference, someone who worked at the office of the Inspector General. I gave them everything. Anonymously at first. Then directly. I sent the files. The audit trails. The employee names. The fake approvals. The altered logs. The ghost policies. The emails. It was all real. And it was all illegal. 2 weeks later, federal investigators showed up at our office. This time, they didn't just pull someone into a room. They locked the building down. We were told to go home. All systems were frozen. All emails were archived. Phones shut off. Nobody could log in. They weren't just investigating Dean anymore. They were investigating the company. And within a month, it all unraveled. Allison Becker, the VP who protected Dean, resigned for personal reasons. But everyone knew better. The company issued a quiet statement, but I'd already seen the court filing. The state filed a formal complaint against her for negligence and willful misconduct. She lost her severance. And last I heard, she was banned from working in any insurance firm regulated by the state of North Carolina. Paul didn't just get fired. He was charged. The forgery, the hacking, the data manipulation, all of it came back to him. And because he tried to frame me? That added witness retaliation to the charges. His name ended up in local news. His face too. I saw his mugshot on the front page of the Raleigh News and Observer. He pled guilty to avoid jail, but he'll never work in finance again. Megan tried to get her job back through a wrongful termination lawyer. She lost. Turns out, once my screenshots and audit trails were turned over to the investigators, she was exposed for more than just one forged approval. She'd been scrubbing client feedback too. Hiding real complaints so the department would get higher scores. As for Dean? Last I heard, he was being sued personally by 2 clients whose policies were accidentally cancelled. One of them was a veteran who got denied life-saving treatment because his coverage had been quietly voided. Dean's name is now tied to multiple lawsuits and an open investigation by the Department of Insurance. And the company? They didn't recover. Within 6 months, they laid off over half the staff. Lost several major accounts. Got slapped with 2 massive fines. And then, they quietly sold the Raleigh office to a smaller firm. Just like that. Gone. Now, here's the part one didn't expect. I got offered a settlement. Not from the company. From the new one that bought them out. They offered me a 5-year position, lead compliance officer, with full autonomy, plus a non-disclosure agreement and a 6-figure retention bonus. I didn't take it. I took something better. I went public. I talked to a reporter from a business accountability outlet. Told them everything. Documents, audio, timeline, names. They did their own digging. And they published a full exposé titled, Inside the Collapse, How One Supervisor's Ego Took Down an Insurance Empire. My name wasn't in the article. But people knew. Enough people read it to know who took the first step. And now? I work for a consumer protection nonprofit. We go after companies that do what mine did, companies that lie, cheat, and break the rules thinking no one will ever call them out. Some days I miss the silence of my old cubicle. But most days, I sleep better knowing I burned the right bridges. Dean called me background noise. But he heard me loud and clear at the end. They all did.